Okay, good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's online wellness webinar. My name is Eric Foster, and I'll be your host as we enlighten and empower you to become your ultimate you. Now, during tonight's webinar, the founder of Be Your Ultimate You, a natural wellness specialist, Nicole Turley, she's going to share pearls of wisdom that will better your quality of life. In fact, some of what you see is actually going to shock you. For example, I consider myself a very healthy individual, and as a father, I want my children to be healthy as well. And then Nicole shared with me some information about dyes that were being put into children's vitamins. Of course, you know, I was giving my children vitamins, and she's been a blessing to me, my children, and so many others. She's dedicated her life to providing countless other people information to empower them so they can be their ultimate best. And we are honored to have her on this webinar tonight as our guest speaker and as our resident specialist that is going to share this information with you all this evening. So without further ado, I would now like to turn the time over to Nicole Turley. Nicole, do we have you on the line?
You do, Eric. A kind introduction, and I always just really enjoy being here and being able to help others learn about natural wellness. It has been an incredible blessing in my life, and so I just feel like it's my duty to share what I've learned with other people to really help them become their ultimate best. And so I, first of all, just want to congratulate each and every person that is on this webinar this evening. You know, I hear from a lot of people that they want to change their life, but they aren't really willing to do anything about it, unfortunately. And so as small as it may seem that you're joining us on a webinar, I can tell you that you are making one step in a very important step in a positive direction. You know, and every day we are choosing with what we're either putting in our mouth, you know, via food and beverages or on our body. We're making choices, whether we realize it or not, that are affecting all these different aspects of our life. And this is how important this information is. And so really learning what to do and not do is the first steps. I mean, you don't know that something's harming you if you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, kind of a thing. So, so I want to congratulate you for being on here and taking the time out of your busy life to really do things that are going to truly make a difference in your life if you apply what we're going to talk about here tonight. And I just want to show you, because I think a picture tells so much. I actually saw this today, and I wanted to share it. Really, the picture says it all. You can choose to be the person on the right, or you can choose to be the person on the left. And I can tell you that by being on this webinar today and trying to educate yourself, you are one step closer to being that gal on the left, which is where I think we all would like to see ourselves at 74 years of age. And so it goes to show how important your life choices make and what a difference it does make in your life. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail, but I do like to share my story because I think it speaks volumes about who I am and what I do and what I know. You know, my journey started because of my daughter. Previous to that, I was eating and drinking and doing the same things that everybody else normally does, kind of just assuming that my government was going to be protecting me from, you know, harmful things, because that's why we have a Food and Drug Administration after all, right? Well, you know, when I found out that my daughter at 4 years old, they thought had the beginning stages of what they considered was ADD, saying that she was having a hard time paying attention in school and her, you know, behavior was inappropriate, where she was just, you know, being impulsive. She couldn't concentrate, and her grades were not doing very well. I mean, in kindergarten, you know, all kids have a little extra energy, and so I didn't really think a whole lot of it until I met with her teacher, and she told me it was out of the norm for all of, you know, most of the other kids. And so, you know, of course, what's the first thing that I did? Well, I took her to the doctor, and, you know, they started talking about, you know, doing tests on her to, you know, ensure that it was ADD, and if it was, that, you know, we could put her on medication. Well, you know, I started looking into the medications, and this is what I found. And this is just a small list of one of the most popular ADD medications on the market, which first of all is not tested on kids under the age of 6, which is frightening. They wanted to give it to my child, you know, who was 4. But then, of course, you look at these scary side effects and thought, I don't want this for my daughter. And I can tell you that now that I've been in this world and teaching people and running across people all the time with children with ADD, that these are not, of course, the sudden death is, but the other symptoms are not things that are uncommon. Seizures, tics, anxiety, not having any appetite, and not being able to sleep are very, very common side effects of these drugs. And this is not something that I wanted for my 4-year-old, and realizing that these are actually brain-altering medications. In fact, ADD medications, most of them, if not all, fall into the area of controlled substances, and that puts them in the same group of medications as Oxycontin and opiates, which is frightening to me that this is our first go-to with these children. So, of course, you can see why I did not want this for my daughter. Then I started getting onto forums where all these teenagers were talking about how they had been introduced to these ADD medications in elementary school, and now they were hooked on them. And, of course, they were getting a high from them. And just like any other drug or alcohol, you have to continue having more and doing something different to get the same high. So these teenagers are now starting to snort their ADD medication, making it, you know, exactly the same as cocaine. So I thought, I'm certainly not going to put cocaine in my 4-year-old's hands. And so, you know, decided that there had to be a better way. And after I did that, you know, we realized that just by taking out dyes, preservatives, pesticides, and other chemicals from her diet, she was like a different child. She was getting good grades again. Her behavior was so much better. You know, she even dropped a little bit of the extra weight that she had. I started doing it to support her and noticed a massive difference in my own body, in my own mood. And then the more research that I did, I realized that these same principles can help a lot of people with all kinds of problems that we think are things that we just have to put up with, or things that are hereditary. You know, cellulite. As thin as and in shape as I was, I still had cellulite. I thought it was just something that was a genetic predisposition. My mother has it, and I was just going to have it. I just had to accept it. Well, when I started taking all this junk out of my diet, I realized that it went away. You know, depression, anxiety, pain, chronic pain, which is often caused by inflammation, something we're going to talk about tonight called leaky gut syndrome. All of these things could be helped by applying these same principles. And that's when I decided there really is something to this. It's not just about ADD. It's about all these health problems that we all think that we have, that we just have to live with. But really there is a solution. And it starts with what we're consuming every day. It makes a huge difference. And so I just started this quest to educate and empower as many people as I could to start really benefiting like we have benefited from this type of information. And, you know, what we're going to be covering tonight is 7 years worth of research and diligence and trials and tribulations that I've experienced, my daughter's experienced, other people that I know that I have helped. I've been in weight loss and fitness for a long time. And so I've compiled all this information to really just help empower others. So we're going to talk about the root cause of a lot of physical and mental pain and suffering that people are experiencing today. We're going to talk about some real basic things that you can do to educate and empower yourself to make better choices, and just give you kind of some real simple basic things to get you started. You know, this is a big journey. It takes time. You will continue to evolve as you go through the process. But I think, you know, it's really important to have somewhere to start and have some basic things that you can begin with. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. So let's start off with, you know, the grocery store, because we're going to talk about, you know, the things that we're putting into our body. And this is a normal grocery store aisle here. And, you know, all of these things are approved by our Food and Drug Administration in the United States. And people say, well, you know, how does that happen? How do they approve things that aren't good for you? Well, you know, in small doses, these things probably really aren't that bad. Back in the day, in the 70s and stuff, when all this stuff started being formulated, having a little bit of dye in your Easter candy wasn't a really big deal. But when it's in every single product on a shelf that you're consuming, it starts having a massive effect on your body. And what's happened is all of these very large, very powerful, very lucrative corporations have realized that they can make food-like substances instead of real food. It costs them a lot less, and they can make it taste, quote unquote good, so we feel like we're eating real food. And that's really, where this problem starts. So, everything, and when I'm saying food, everything really, it goes from infant formula and baby food when children are forced entering the world and learning to eat. A lot of this stuff is targeted at kids. You're going to find, things like processed meat that you put in their lunches. Oh my goodness, school lunches. They're about the worst offender that there is. And I'm going to pick on chicken nuggets for a minute and just kind of describe how this process takes place. So, this is not real chicken that this stuff is made out of. It's not like chicken breast meat that we would think. It's actually, a bunch of fillers and binders and, things that are, basically meat substitutes. They will drip some chicken flavoring on it from real chicken, and they form it into a familiar shape that and call it a chicken nugget, and that's what our kids are eating. So, what are some things that you really want to avoid? Like, what are the big dangers? Well, there's several preservatives that are in food. So we can't possibly cover them all. I'm just kind of touching on the big ones here. The top 3 petrochemicals that you want to avoid that are preservatives, they're very big and used in many products, are BHA, BHT, and TBHQ. Pretty much anything that has, a bunch of letters and an acronym is probably falling into this realm. But when I say petrochemicals, I truly mean they are chemicals that are derived from petroleum. So it's the same thing that they make gasoline and kerosene with. And it's frightening, but it's true that these things are allowed in your food. A lot of it is comes from China, and it is created to make food, a chemical that keeps the food to last longer. And it is permitted in your food, and it's in just about everything. Anything that ends in a zoate or a bromate, and I've used a couple of examples here of how you might typically find these on a label. Sorbates or sorbic acid, nitrates, which are typically found in processed meats. Sulfites, and you can see that there's usually a couple of different, spellings for those. Anything that ends in a poly, a propyl, or a phenyl. And again, there's some examples there of how you might see this on a label. You want to avoid that. And certainly parabens, which are more so found in your cosmetic products. And if you have any question as to whether or not these things cause cancer, I can tell you that recently they have actually found parabens in breast cancer tissue cells. So if there was any doubt before that it causes cancer, there certainly isn't now. These are all things that you definitely want to avoid. It's really any type of preservative. Other ingredients that you want to avoid, any kind of like coloring in the dyes that Eric was talking about. So that would be a color followed by a number. FD&C or DNC is also a type of food coloring, as well as tartrazine. And I use that just as an example because food corporations are starting to on the defense. They're realizing that people are educating themselves. They're realizing that people are starting to pay attention to these things and to know what's in their food. So they're coming up with all kinds of new fancy names to kind of hide these things in the food, like tartrazine. And people are like, what is that? So, my golden rule of thumb is if you don't know what it is, then you don't need to be eating it. But anytime you see the word artificial in an ingredient, basically that's your government's warning that it can contain anything under the sun. There are no specifications as to what artificial means or can contain in an ingredient. So you see that, you need to run. Anything that has the word flavor or flavoring, even natural flavor or natural flavoring. There's no specific rules about what that means. So it's way too obtuse. You want to avoid it. It's just a sneaky way of sneaking more stuff into your food. Artificial sweeteners, in my estimation, are the devil's spawn when it comes to ruining your digestive system. So a lot of people are turned on to the aspartame and saccharin. We know those are bad. But things like Truvia, a lot of people think it's the same thing as stevia, which is natural and comes from a plant, and it is not. So these are all things, that you definitely want to avoid when you see them on a label. Well, what's so bad about these, little bit of preservatives? Well, I'm going to tell you. So there's something called leaky gut syndrome. And this occurs in your body because your body was not designed to handle chemicals. It was not designed to ingest them. It was not designed to break them down, to know what to do with them. So what happens is these chemicals, once they are ingested, the first line of defense, of course, is your digestive system. So what they do is they start creating these little microscopic pores in the lining of your gut wall. And then what happens is you have things like little microorganisms that your body is supposed to kill off, and toxins and gluten and all these different little parasites and things that are like, they occur on fruit naturally, but they are entering your bloodstream way before they are supposed to, or if at all. So typically when these things go through your digestive system as they're supposed to, they get killed off, they get broken down, they, nutrients in your food is absorbed properly. Well, if it's food's entering your bloodstream before it's ever gone through your digestive system, you can't possibly be properly absorbing the nutrients from your food. So what ends up occurring are things like food intolerances, inflammation, which causes just about every disease and illness that you can think of under the sun. Like we were discussing, your inability to absorb nutrients properly, and a ton of autoimmune diseases that are responsible for many of the health afflictions that people are experiencing today. So leaky gut syndrome is extremely common. Millions of Americans don't realize that they have it, and it's affecting every single part of your body. There is a very real connection between your head and your gut. In fact, your gut has more nerves than your brain has. So it does affect literally every single part of your body. And these are just some of the side effects and things that you can look forward to as a result of leaky gut syndrome. Of course, having, an extended stomach, bloating, excess belly fat, and bowel conditions are the most obvious ones because that's something that you would typically relate to your gut. However, the things that a lot of people are experiencing that they don't know are related to leaky gut syndrome are fatigue, mood swings, insomnia, headaches, and migraines. Like I was saying, pretty much anything that is associated with inflammation, like joint pain, asthma, ADD. Again, that's caused by inflammation. So allergies, not just food allergies, but also seasonal allergies. I can tell you that when we stopped feeding my daughter all these preservatives and dyes and pesticides and chemicals, her asthma was barely existent. Her seasonal allergies completely came to a halt. So these were things that we just thought we had to put up with, but you don't. And celiac disease, a lot of people are getting turned on to that. It's a severe gluten intolerance. I can tell you that most people are gluten intolerant. You weren't really created to eat gluten. There's about 300 times more gluten in our bread these days than there was back in the day when they started making bread. And so that's why a lot of people have intolerances. But if you don't stop doing these things and you end up with something like celiac disease, what happens is it's a food intolerance that gets completely out of control to the point that your body can't handle it at all. And you never want to get there. Of course, you'd like to be able to have a sandwich here and there or, enjoy, something maybe that, you wouldn't normally have on a daily basis every now and again, and it should be okay. But if you don't get a control of this type of thing, all of these afflictions can get completely out of control. A lot of skin-associated conditions, by the way, like eczema, psoriasis, and so forth, have a lot to do with leaky gut syndrome. Everything even up to multiple sclerosis, which people think is incurable. It's not. You would be amazed what you can do for MS through diet. So what can you do about it? Okay, how can you destroy that leaky gut going on? Well, let's talk about some preventative things. First of all, you want to pay attention to your labels when you're shopping. So on the top here, you can see these are 2 salad dressings. You can see at the top, all of these things that you can't pronounce, including artificial flavors, preservatives, and so forth. The second is also a salad dressing, but it is an organic salad dressing, and you can read everything on here. The only thing that you might not totally recognize is xanthan gum, and it comes from a bean. It's kind of like a natural binder. But everything else here you can read. So if you can't read it, you can't pronounce it, then you don't need to be eating it, is a great general rule of thumb. We talked about artificial sweeteners. Okay, so what's better? Well, agave is certainly better. It's natural. It comes from a cactus plant. Honey comes from bees. Stevia comes from a plant. Xylosweet is a sugar alcohol, but it's still natural. It actually has some good benefits as far as preventing cavities. Sugar is not my favorite thing. Most of it is genetically modified, but I would say if you have to have sugar, having sugar in the raw is definitely a safer choice than any of the other artificial sweeteners. So for instance, if you're going to buy yogurt, a lot of people are buying yogurt. There's a lot of, benefits to yogurt for the gut and probiotics and so forth. So it's fine. Get plain and then add your own agave and your own berries and make it yourself sweetened. Much, much healthier for you. So that's just an example of how you can put this stuff into practice. Another good rule of thumb is buying and consuming real whole food. You hear people talk about whole food a lot. Well, what does that mean? Basically it means, fruits, vegetables, and meats, things that were created for your body to consume, that your body recognizes as food. Well, there's some things that you want to be careful with these as well. So for fruit and vegetables, you want to go with organic. Otherwise, it has pesticides on it. And of course, there's some fruits that have a hard shell, like let's say avocados, for instance. You don't need to be as concerned about the pesticides because you're not eating the skin. But still, the type of soil that it's grown in and so forth matters, how that fruit is growing. So if you don't think this matters, then I would encourage you to go grab your fruit next time and spray Roundup all over it, and then rinse it off with a little bit of water and eat it. Because if you're buying non-organic fruit, that's basically what you're doing. Hormones. These are things that could be found in a lot of meats and dairy products. What they do is, you figure there's a lot less farms and a lot more people on the earth than there used to be. Well, how are they doing it? They're injecting these animals with hormones. They're making them grow faster so that they can keep up with demand and it doesn't take as long to raise them. They also grow them in very inhumane conditions. If you've ever looked up any information about pork farming, for instance, you'll see that it's frightening what takes place with these animals. So because they're in such horrific, crowded conditions, they will stuff them with tons of antibiotics to try to keep them from being sickly and dying so that they can use the meat. Well, of course, if the animal's taking antibiotics, guess what? You're eating antibiotics. Antibiotic use that is inappropriate is another huge cause for leaky gut syndrome. Food additives, basically anything that doesn't need to be in the food. And a great example of this is the next time that you go and you're buying frozen fish, you can look at the label and find that they are putting carbon monoxide in the fish to preserve it. I'm just going to let you think on that for a second, because I'm telling you that it is on a label, and if you look at frozen fish, you will be stunned that, yes, it says carbon monoxide is in your fish, but it's true. So label reading, again, is extremely important. And then you want to be avoiding genetically modified foods. And this can include vegetables. So not every vegetable is a safe vegetable. I would say that the biggest genetically modified food groups would be the corn, soy, canola, dairy, sugar, zucchini and squash, papayas, believe it or not, particularly Hawaiian papayas, cotton oil, and salmon. These foods are more genetically modified than others. And a lot of people hear that term genetically modified and you don't understand what it means. Well, I'll give you an example. Corn, for instance. What these companies have done is they create food that basically can withstand massive amounts of pesticides without changing the food itself. So, like, normally organic matter, such as a ear of corn, would only be able to handle so much of a pesticide on it before it would crumble. Well, they've created basically, again, fake food that can withstand massive amounts of pesticides so that they can put it and grow it into basically any type of condition, and it will continue to grow and you're eating that. So it can withstand, let's say, for instance, pesticides are created so that, like, if a bug bites it, their stomach explodes. So you can imagine what that's doing to you. That's just an example. So those are some things that you definitely want to avoid that are unfortunately in food. The next thing, besides leaky gut, that you want to be very keen and aware of is alkalinity. This is a very hot topic now. You hear a lot of movie stars talking about alkaline diets and alkaline water. Well, here's the reason. Your body's pH is extremely important to conclude that total healing of chronic illness can, if and when you have proper pH. And that is a 3 to a 7.4, 7.5 at the most, alkalinity, alkaline side of that scale. It's extremely important to just every system of the body. So what do we do about that? Well, the alkalinity is one part that's important, but it also, on the reverse, if you're too acidic, it creates a lot of inflammation. And all of these conditions here are either caused by or aggravated when your body is overly acidic. And there's no coincidence here that this list is very, very similar to the list that we saw related to leaky gut syndrome. It all is very much connected. In fact, and this is not completely new information, by the way. In 1931, Dr. Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize, proving that cancer cannot survive when the body is properly alkaline. And in an alkaline environment is an oxygen-rich environment. There's no coincidence that the number one thing that your body needs is oxygen. You cannot live without oxygen. Oxygen is means the way that nutrients actually enters and is absorbed into your cells, and so is water, which is why alkaline water is getting really popular now. So that is how impactful this information can be to your well-being. So things that I would start to do if I were someone new getting started in this, looking back, wishing that I had this information, is to start with my free grocery guide. It's absolutely free. It's chock full of information. It has taken me months and months to put this information together for you. But I think that it's really imperative for you to grasp the fact that that is medicine. And when you start looking at these foods and all of the wonderful health benefits they have versus all of the things that we just saw, that processed food is doing to you, you're going to start really understanding what food can do for you. Now, in a perfect world, people would be eating about 70 to 80% of alkaline food. That's the average person. Okay, of course, everyone's pH is a little bit different, but that's on average. So that usually seems like a really big leap to someone who's been eating tons of processed food or who eats out a lot at restaurants. So I like to tell people, go ahead and just get the guide, and if you can start with 3 alkalizing snacks a day, because most people are not eating enough a day. Most people are eating 2 or 3 times a day, and then they're starving at night because they haven't eaten enough all day. So getting in some extra snacks is not only going to boost your metabolism, but it's going to help to start this process of alkalizing your body if you're picking, proper snacks. So that's what's in this guide. I would also encourage you to try 3 new foods a week, things that you've never even heard of, that you didn't even know existed. I mean, have fun with it. Play with it. If you're making a lifestyle change, it doesn't mean that you have to completely cut off everything that you've been doing. I mean, we do want to cut out the things that we just did for you. That would be best. But definitely trying new things, experiment a little bit, have fun with it. I will promise you, from someone that has helped people with weight loss for years, hundreds of people, that if you don't learn how to make healthy food taste good, you won't eat it. You're not going to stick to it. And that's why a lot of people don't like fruits and vegetables, or they don't at least like them as much as they like a lot of other junk, because it doesn't taste good to you. So you have to change that. You need to do some things. You need to try some recipes. You need to venture out of yourself a little bit to learn how to make this stuff taste good. And it doesn't mean you have to spend hours and hours and hours in the kitchen, I promise you. In fact, worked with a friend of mine very closely who is a professional chef, and we've created this Alkalicious cookbook. And so basically what it is it's 7 breakfasts, 7 lunches, 7 desserts, 7 snacks, and we even throw in a bonus of 7 desserts for $7. I mean, I can't really make this any less expensive. Obviously we have to pay for our time putting this all together, but it's to give you an introduction. And in here, Chef Kristen gives awesome tips about how to make alkalizing food taste good, some different oils and vinegars and spices that you can experiment with. She's got great advice. So this is a great starting point to try to start incorporating some of these as meals and venturing out a little bit. We've tried to keep this super simple so it's not real time consuming, but you do have to know that you're going to have to invest in some oils and vinegars and spices and things to get yourself going, to get yourself started. I've also included a free report that comes with this cookbook, which is how to avoid toxins in your food and water. So it gets into some of the information that we covered tonight. Of course, I couldn't possibly get into all of it in a brief webinar. I just wanted to give you the basics this evening. But that report is a little bit more in depth about, because we didn't even touch on the water factor, which is very important. You should be drinking half of your body weight in ounces of water every day. And if you're doing that, but your water is toxic, and I don't care if it's still going to be causing you problems, including pharmaceuticals that are in water, that are in tap water, that are in bottled water. And so that report is going to tell you how to avoid that too. So you can check out that link as well and get that. That's all for just $7. And then the last thing that I would encourage you to do is start seriously considering getting yourself on a probiotic. A probiotic is about the number one thing that every single person on the planet can do for themselves to help improve their wellness. You are supposed to have about 85% good bacteria in your system. You have good and you have bad. If you have an overabundance of bad bacteria, it's going to take over and it's going to cause a lot of health problems for you. So one of the ways that you can help heal leaky gut, and you can really start restoring your wellness of your digestive system so you're properly absorbing the nutrients. I mean, you can eat the stuff in this grocery guide and do all this cooking and everything all day long. If your body is not absorbing the material, it's not doing you a ton of good. So one of the best ways to get that to happen is with a good quality probiotic. But I will tell you that it's like anything else. When there's a fad, when people out there talking about just like alkalized water, it's so huge right now. There's all these people, unfortunately, making tons of money on people that don't realize what they're purchasing. They see it says alkalized on it, they figure it must be, and so they start drinking it. Same thing with probiotics. Just because it has the word probiotic on it does not mean it's good. There's so many factors involved with making a proper probiotic, and a lot of them are the manufacturing processes, the type of container that it's in, heat and light getting in there can kill off all the good bacteria. You know, these are live cultures, so it's the process of creating that and keeping that stable, and also making sure that, because most people, of course, that have leaky gut or have digestive problems have an overly acidic system. So if the probiotic touches your stomach and completely gets wiped out by all the stomach acid you have going on, it's not doing you a lot of good. So the one that I promote and like has a microencapsulated technology to prevent that from happening. And I can promise you that every single one of these things that I encourage other people to do, I have done myself. I have tested them on myself and other people. So I can tell you what works and doesn't. So that is another, you know, people always say they're always looking for the magic pill. I would say that when it comes to natural wellness, a good quality probiotic is the magic pill that you've been looking for to help you get started. So there's a lot of other things that we could discuss tonight and things that you could do, but I'm just kind of trying to give you some basics and get you started. I'm providing my email there for you. If you have specific things that you want to discuss, situations that you have going on with yourself, please feel free to reach out to me. My consultations are $37 for up to an hour. Again, I try to make myself as available to people and keep this as inexpensive as I possibly can so that you can have some knowledge and get some help. So feel free to reach out to me. And if you do opt in for the grocery guide, you know, you will automatically be on our list. And, you know, we try not to over inundate people with emails, maybe, you know, 3 to 4 a week, and just give you some information that's enlightening and empowering to help you continue on this journey. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I really appreciate your attendance, and I'm so proud of you for taking a step in a different direction and doing something different. But just remember, I mean, you have to do something with this information. Knowing it isn't enough. You know, you need to actually take that information and you need to take some steps forward. And every single day, do one new thing to help better your health. It's going to be the difference between the type of life that you're going to live. Everything from what you can do physically to your appearance to your mood, all of it. So thank you so much for being here. I so much appreciate you, and God bless.